The people who save your life rarely look like heroes. Sometimes, they're 6 years old. The first thing I noticed was the smell of warm vanilla drifting through the grand ballroom. Soft enough to remind me of childhood, expensive enough to remind me I didn't belong there. My name is Emily Carter, and I had spent the last 8 hours arranging desserts that most people in this room would barely taste before moving on to another conversation worth more than my annual salary. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors while a string quartet floated through the air, wrapping Manhattan's wealthiest guests in effortless elegance. My 6-year-old daughter, Lily, sat quietly on a folding chair near the catering station with a coloring book balanced across her knees. School had been closed for the holiday, and after my babysitter canceled at the last minute, bringing her to work had been my only option. She had promised to stay out of everyone's way, and until then, she'd kept that promise perfectly. I checked the final dessert display one last time. At the center sat a 3-tier white cake decorated with delicate sugar flowers and edible gold leaf. It had taken nearly 12 hours to prepare. Tonight's charity gala celebrated another year of donations to children's hospitals, and every detail had to be flawless. "Emily," my manager whispered, adjusting his tie nervously. "They're here." I didn't have to ask who he meant. Conversations softened before I even turned around. Security personnel appeared near every entrance without drawing attention to themselves. Men in perfectly tailored black suits scanned the room with practiced calm. Then he walked in. Adrian Moretti wasn't the loudest man in the ballroom. He didn't need to be. Confidence followed him the way shadows follow sunlight. Around 6'3", dressed in a charcoal suit that fit as though it had been sewn directly onto him, he moved with quiet certainty while politicians, CEOs, and celebrities greeted him with respectful smiles. I'd heard his name before, usually whispered. Officially, he was an investor, philanthropist, and owner of several international companies. Unofficially, people simply lowered their voices whenever they spoke about him. He stopped beside the charity director, exchanged a brief handshake, and accepted polite applause from the room. I focused on my work instead. Rich men with complicated reputations weren't part of my world. Cakes were. Frosting made sense. Recipes followed rules. People didn't. "Mom." Lily's small voice interrupted my thoughts. She was staring across the ballroom instead of coloring. "Something's wrong." I glanced toward her. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She didn't answer immediately. Her blue eyes stayed fixed on the dessert table where 2 elegantly dressed women chatted with one of the event coordinators. One of them laughed softly, reached toward the centerpiece cake for only a second, then stepped away as if nothing had happened. It looked completely ordinary. I almost dismissed Lily's worried expression as imagination. Children notice strange things all the time. Then Lily slowly stood from her chair. Her crayons scattered across the carpet unnoticed. Her face had gone unusually pale. Before I could reach her, she took off running between the crowded tables, her tiny shoes tapping against the marble floor. Every conversation seemed to blur together as I hurried after her, quietly calling her name. She stopped only a few feet from Adrian Moretti just as a server placed a silver cake knife into his hand. The ballroom fell silent when Lily pointed directly at the cake, her voice clear enough for every guest to hear. "Don't eat it," she cried. "She put something in your cake." I did not hear my own footsteps as I rushed toward Lily. All I could hear was the silence that followed her words. Hundreds of conversations had vanished in an instant, replaced by the heavy stillness that settles over a room when nobody knows what happens next. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Lily," I whispered as I reached her side, placing both hands gently on her shoulders. "Sweetheart, what are you talking about?" She did not look at me. Her frightened blue eyes never left the cake resting on the polished silver stand. "She touched it," Lily said, her tiny voice shaking now. "The lady touched it." When everybody was looking over there, I forced a nervous smile toward the surrounding guests. "I am so sorry. She is only 6. She probably misunderstood something." Nobody smiled back. Adrian Moretti slowly lowered the cake knife onto the table without taking his eyes off Lily. There was no anger in his expression. No panic either. Only careful attention, as though every word she spoke deserved to be heard. He crouched until he was almost eye level with her. "Can you show me which lady?" he asked calmly. Lily swallowed before lifting one trembling finger toward the crowd. Every face instinctively turned in the same direction. The elegant blonde woman, she indicated looked completely confused. She blinked several times before forcing a polite laugh. "This is absurd," she said. "I have never even met this child. I wanted the marble floor to open beneath me." "Mr. Moretti, I apologize," I said quickly. "My daughter has a vivid imagination sometimes." Does she? Adrian interrupted softly. His eyes remained on Lily. "Or does she simply notice what adults ignore?" That question caught everyone off guard, including me. One of his security men stepped closer. "Sir." Adrian raised one finger without looking away. "Nobody leaves the ballroom." The instruction was quiet, but within seconds, every exit was being watched. There was no shouting, no chaos, just an invisible shift in the atmosphere that made every guest suddenly aware of how much authority one man truly carried. My stomach tightened. "Please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I cannot let my daughter become part of this. We came here to work. That is all." Adrian finally looked at me for the first time. His steel gray eyes studied my face with surprising patience. "What is your name?" "Emily Carter." "And your daughter?" "Lily." He nodded once before turning toward the head pastry chef. "Who prepared this cake?" The chef stepped forward immediately. "Our bakery did, sir." Every ingredient was inspected before delivery. "Who had access after it arrived?" Nobody answered right away. People exchanged uncertain glances. Staff members quietly looked at one another, each trying to remember the last 30 minutes. Then I remembered. The woman Lily had pointed at had brushed against the dessert table while speaking with an event coordinator. It had lasted only a second. At the time it seemed meaningless. Now it replayed inside my head with uncomfortable clarity. Adrian noticed the change in my expression. "You remembered something." I hesitated. I remember seeing that woman near the cake, but I did not think anything of it. The blonde woman's face immediately changed from confidence to disbelief. "Are you accusing me because of a child's imagination?" "No," Adrian answered evenly. "I am delaying dessert because a child believed something was wrong. There is a difference." He picked up a silver dessert fork instead of the knife and carefully removed a small piece of frosting from the side of the cake. Instead of tasting it, he handed it to one of his security specialists. "Have this examined." The room remained silent as the man disappeared through a side door carrying nothing more than a tiny bite of vanilla frosting. And for reasons I still could not explain, I realized that somewhere deep inside me, I was beginning to hope Lily had been wrong. I wanted to believe the laboratory would come back with nothing. I wanted someone to smile, apologize for the misunderstanding, and let Lily and me quietly disappear into the Manhattan night. Instead, every passing minute made the ballroom feel smaller. Nobody complained anymore. The orchestra had stopped playing. Champagne glasses remained untouched. Conversations had been replaced by whispers that drifted across the room like distant rain. Lily slipped her tiny hand into mine. Her fingers were cold. "Mom," she whispered, "are we in trouble?" I squeezed her hand gently. "No, sweetheart. Everything is going to be okay." I prayed she believed me because I was no longer convincing myself. Adrian Moretti stood near the dessert table with the same calm expression he had worn since Lily spoke. It amazed me. Most people would have shown fear or anger. He showed patience, as though he had learned long ago that panic never solved anything. Nearly 15 minutes later, the security specialist returned carrying a small insulated container. He leaned close to Adrian and quietly spoke a few words I could not hear. For the first time that evening, Adrian's expression changed. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He looked toward the untouched cake before turning his eyes back to me. The silence became unbearable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian said evenly, "dessert will not be served tonight." Nobody moved. Nobody argued. One guest finally asked the question everyone else was afraid to say out loud. "Is there actually something wrong with the cake?" Adrian waited a moment before answering. "The preliminary test detected a foreign substance that does not belong in food. Until we know exactly how it got there, nobody will consume anything from this dessert table." A wave of disbelief spread through the ballroom. I felt every ounce of strength leave my legs. Lily had been right. My daughter had seen something every adult had missed. Before I could process that realization, 2 security officers approached me. Their expressions remained respectful, but their presence alone made my heartbeat quicken. "Miss Carter," one of them said politely, "Mr. Moretti would like to speak with you privately." Every eye in the room followed us as I walked across the marble floor with Lily beside me. I had never felt more exposed in my life. Adrian waited inside a small conference room connected to the ballroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, but I barely noticed the view. "Please sit," he said. I remained standing. "If you think I had anything to do with this, you are wrong." He studied my face for several seconds before answering. "I do not think that." "Then why am I here?" "Because someone clearly wanted access to that cake, and according to the event schedule, you supervised the dessert display." The words stung because they were true. I closed my eyes for a brief second. I never left it unattended. Then I stopped speaking. That was not entirely true. My mind replayed the evening again. About 20 minutes before Adrian arrived, my manager had asked me to help carry additional coffee service into the ballroom. I had stepped away for less than 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes. "You remembered something else," Adrian observed quietly. I nodded slowly. I left the table for a moment. Shame settled over me like a heavy blanket. Only a couple of minutes. I thought another server was watching it. One of Adrian's assistants placed a printed security photograph on the table. My breath caught instantly. The image showed me walking away with the coffee cart. Behind the cake stood the same elegant blonde woman Lily had identified earlier. She appeared to be adjusting the flowers beside the display while everyone else looked toward the stage. It lasted only seconds. Nothing more. Yet seeing it frozen in a photograph made my stomach twist. "This does not prove she placed anything there," I whispered. Adrian nodded. "No, but it proves your daughter was telling the truth." He looked toward Lily, who sat quietly swinging her small legs beneath the chair, completely unaware that she had just become the most credible witness in a room filled with powerful adults. Then he looked back at me with a seriousness that sent a chill through my chest. "Until I know who tried to deceive us tonight, neither you nor your daughter will be leaving my protection." I had spent my entire life teaching myself that accepting help always came with a price. Standing inside Adrian Moretti's private conference room, I could not decide which frightened me more, the woman who had somehow reached the cake or the man calmly offering us protection. "That is not necessary," I said as steadily as I could. "Lily and I will go home. We will answer any questions tomorrow." Adrian looked at me without the slightest sign of frustration. If tonight was only about the dessert, I would agree. He stepped toward the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Midtown. Below us, streams of yellow taxi cabs moved through the city as if nothing unusual had happened. Someone chose this event because they expected everything to look ordinary. They planned carefully. They knew where everyone would be standing. They knew when your attention would be somewhere else. He turned back toward me. That means they also knew who would become the easiest person to blame. His words settled heavily in my chest. I had already imagined tomorrow's headlines. Catering supervisor questioned after charity gala investigation. Single mother under suspicion. Years of hard work could disappear overnight because I had walked away from one table for less than 2 minutes. "I did not do this," I whispered. "I know." The answer came so quickly that I looked up in surprise. "You know?" Adrian nodded once. Someone guilty would have spent the last hour explaining why they were innocent. "You have only been worried about your daughter." Before I could answer, another member of his security team entered carrying a tablet computer. "Sir, we recovered additional footage." Adrian motioned for him to continue. The man placed the tablet on the conference table. Multiple security camera angles filled the screen. One camera showed the ballroom entrance. Another overlooked the dessert display. A third covered the service hallway leading toward the kitchen. We watched in silence. There I was, pushing the coffee cart away from the cake exactly as I remembered. Seconds later, the blonde woman approached the display while pretending to answer a telephone call. She paused beside the cake for only a brief moment before continuing across the room. It looked innocent, almost too innocent. Then Adrian slowed the recording frame by frame. My breath caught. As the woman adjusted the flowers decorating the cake stand, the sleeve of her evening gown shifted just enough to reveal something resting against her wrist. A tiny silver spray bottle, no larger than a lipstick tube, disappeared back beneath the fabric almost instantly. "Can you zoom in?" Adrian asked. The technician enlarged the image until it became grainy. It was impossible to identify exactly what she held, but it certainly was not jewelry. "She planned this," I whispered. Adrian remained silent for several seconds before speaking. "Perhaps. Or perhaps someone planned it for her." That answer surprised me. "You think she was being used?" People do unexpected things for money, fear, or misplaced loyalty. I never assume I know which one until I have evidence. His calm reasoning felt strangely reassuring. He was not chasing easy answers. He was searching for the right one. Lily had quietly climbed onto one of the leather chairs during the meeting. She hugged the stuffed rabbit she carried almost everywhere and looked toward the tablet. "That is not the lady I saw first," she said softly. Every adult in the room froze. Adrian slowly turned toward her. "What do you mean?" Lily pointed at the paused image. She touched the cake. But another lady talked to her before that. She had red shoes. Really shiny red shoes. Nobody had mentioned another woman. Nobody had asked Lily about shoes. Adrian exchanged a quick glance with his security chief. "Replay the hallway camera," he instructed. The footage rolled backward several minutes until a woman wearing an elegant black dress crossed the hallway. Most of her body disappeared behind other guests, but one detail remained impossible to miss. Bright red high heels reflected the ballroom lights with every step. Adrian's expression became unreadable. "Now," he said quietly, "we are finally looking in the right direction." I had always believed the truth revealed itself one piece at a time, but that night it felt more like assembling a puzzle with half the pieces hidden. The image of the woman wearing bright red shoes stayed frozen on the screen, while everyone in the conference room stared at it in silence. She never faced the camera directly. Her dark dress blended into the crowd, but those polished heels caught every beam of light as though they wanted to be noticed. "Can you identify her?" Adrian asked. His security chief enlarged the footage again before quietly shaking his head. "Not from this angle. Her face is blocked the entire time." Adrian folded his arms and continued watching without saying another word. I expected frustration. Instead, he looked almost thoughtful, as though an answer had just confirmed something he had suspected all along. "What are you thinking?" I asked before I could stop myself. He glanced toward me. "The person who touched the cake was never the architect of this plan." "Because of the other woman?" He nodded. "Because people who carry out instructions rarely make the decisions." His words settled over the room. With uncomfortable weight, I suddenly remembered something my grandmother used to say while teaching me how to bake. The hands holding the spoon are not always the hands following the recipe. Somehow, the same idea applied here. Another security officer entered carrying a folder filled with guest registrations and event credentials. "We found her," he announced. The woman with the red shoes checked in under the name Victoria Hayes. I frowned. "Checked in?" "Yes," he replied. "But the identification she used belongs to someone who has been traveling overseas for 3 weeks." Adrian slowly exhaled. "A false identity." The officer nodded. "There is more." He placed another photograph on the table. It showed the blonde woman leaving the ballroom through a service corridor nearly 20 minutes before Lily spoke. She was alone, carrying nothing unusual. Less than 30 seconds later, the woman with the red shoes appeared from the opposite direction and briefly crossed paths with her. They never stopped walking. They never appeared to speak. But as they passed each other, their hands brushed together for less than a second. "Pause it," Adrian said. The image stopped. Even I could see it now. A tiny object had changed hands between them. Something no larger than a sugar packet. So Lily was right about both of them. I whispered. Adrian looked toward my daughter, who had quietly fallen asleep with her head resting against the stuffed rabbit in her lap. Her peaceful face seemed impossible after everything that had happened. "She noticed what trained professionals overlooked," he said softly. There was genuine respect in his voice, not amusement. His security chief broke the silence. "Sir, should we notify the authorities with everything we have?" Adrian considered the question carefully before answering. "Yes, every piece of evidence goes to them. This event supports children's hospitals. It will not become the center of rumors or speculation." His response surprised me again. He was not trying to control the investigation. He wanted it handled properly. The image I had formed of Adrian Moretti from whispered conversations and newspaper headlines no longer fit the man standing in front of me. Before I could make sense of that realization, another message appeared on the tablet. The technician's face immediately changed. "Sir," he said quietly, "we have a problem." Adrian stepped closer. "What is it?" "We finished tracing the guest list against the security footage." He hesitated for only a second before continuing. "Victoria Hayes entered the ballroom tonight." He tapped the screen again. "But according to every camera covering the exits, she never left the building." I never imagined that a luxury ballroom could suddenly feel like a maze. The glittering chandeliers still hung above us. The fresh flowers still filled the air with the scent of roses and lilies. Guests still stood in elegant evening wear. Yet beneath all that beauty, every smile had disappeared. Adrian's security team immediately divided into small groups, quietly checking every hallway, private lounge, kitchen entrance, and service corridor without alarming the remaining guests. Nobody ran. Nobody shouted. It was all calm, organized, and strangely efficient. I looked down at Lily, still sleeping peacefully in the oversized leather chair. I wished I could borrow even a fraction of that peace. Adrian remained beside the conference table, studying the building blueprint that one of his assistants had opened on the tablet. Every exit? He asked. Covered, the security chief answered. Parking garage? Covered. Loading dock? Covered. Adrian nodded slowly, but I noticed the slight crease forming between his eyebrows. Then she is still inside. The word sent a chill through me. Somewhere in this enormous hotel, a woman using a false identity had simply disappeared. Could she have changed clothes? I asked quietly. Adrian looked toward me. That is exactly what I would do. Within minutes, the hotel management discreetly provided access to every security camera in the building. The footage began playing across multiple screens. Ballrooms, elevators, hallways, restaurants, conference rooms, the lobby. Hundreds of people moved naturally through the hotel, each one becoming another face to examine. My eyes quickly became exhausted. Adrian never looked away. He studied every screen with remarkable patience, occasionally asking the technicians to replay only a few seconds from one camera before moving on. Then he suddenly raised one hand. Stop. Every screen froze. Camera 23. The technician enlarged the image. I frowned. It showed nothing more than a housekeeping cart parked outside a guest elevator. Advance 5 seconds. The cart remained still. 5 more. A hotel employee pushed the cart toward the elevator before disappearing inside. Adrian leaned closer. Go back. The footage rolled backward. Now slow it down. Frame by frame, the housekeeper approached the cart from around the corner. Something about her movement felt unnatural. She kept one hand covering the side of her face as though adjusting her hair. Zoom in on her shoes, Adrian said. The image sharpened just enough. Beneath the plain housekeeping uniform were unmistakable glossy red heels. I felt my breath catch. It is her, I whispered. She changed clothes. Adrian gave a quiet nod. She planned an escape long before she entered this building. The technician quickly switched to the elevator camera. The disguised housekeeper entered alone while pushing the cart. The elevator doors closed. Moments later, another camera captured the same elevator opening on the 17th floor. The cart rolled out into a private executive hallway reserved for invited VIP guests and staff with special credentials. That floor has private meeting suites, the hotel manager explained nervously. Very few people have access. Adrian's expression hardened, though his voice remained perfectly controlled. Then somebody inside the hotel helped her. Before anyone could respond, Lily stirred awake behind us. She rubbed her eyes and looked around with sleepy confusion before quietly climbing down from the chair. Mom, she asked, can we go home now? I knelt beside her and gently brushed a strand of blonde hair away from her face. Not yet, sweetheart. She nodded, then looked past me toward the frozen security image. Her little forehead wrinkled. That is not the same cart. Everyone in the room turned toward her. Adrian crouched beside her again. What do you mean? Lily pointed confidently at the screen. The lady pushed a different cart before. This one has blue towels. The other one had white flowers. Silence filled the room once more. Adrian slowly stood, his eyes fixed on the security footage. Replay the lobby camera, he said quietly. We are not following the woman anymore. He looked directly at the housekeeping card on the screen. We are following whatever she wanted us to miss. I had spent years believing that children simply noticed different things than adults. That night, I realized something far more unsettling. Adults often stopped noticing altogether. The conference room became silent again as the technicians immediately rewound the lobby footage. Adrian stood beside the largest monitor with his hands resting lightly against the edge of the table, watching every frame without blinking. The housekeeping cart rolled through the lobby exactly as before, the woman in the borrowed uniform keeping her head lowered beneath a plain cap. Nothing seemed unusual until the recording reached the moment she disappeared behind a decorative column wrapped with white orchids. "Freeze it," Adrian said. The technician obeyed. "Now switch to the camera covering the opposite angle." Another screen appeared. My eyes widened. The woman emerged from behind the column, pushing the same cart, but the arrangement inside had changed. Lily had been right. Earlier footage clearly showed fresh white flower boxes stacked on the upper shelf. Now only neatly folded blue towels remained. There was enough time to replace everything, one security officer suggested. Adrian slowly shook his head. Not in 7 seconds. The technician checked the timestamp twice before nodding in agreement. 7 seconds. Barely enough time to walk around the column. Certainly not enough time to unload an entire cart. Adrian pointed toward the screen. "Show me the camera inside the service corridor connected to the florist entrance." Another recording appeared. The corridor looked empty until, several minutes before the gala officially began, 2 identical housekeeping carts entered from opposite directions. One carried white flower boxes. The other carried blue towels. They stopped beside each other for only a moment while 2 hotel employees exchanged brief greetings before continuing in opposite directions. "There," Adrian said quietly. The carts were switched before anyone started looking. My heart skipped a beat. The disguised woman had never changed the contents of her cart. She had simply taken a different one that had already been waiting for her. That means somebody inside the hotel prepared everything hours before the guests arrived, I whispered. Adrian gave a slow nod. Exactly. His security chief immediately began making phone calls, requesting employee schedules, maintenance records, and delivery logs. Every piece of information suddenly mattered. Lily tugged gently on the sleeve of my jacket. "Mom, I am hungry." I looked at the untouched snack tray sitting in the corner of the conference room before remembering why none of us had touched any food all evening. Adrian noticed my hesitation. Without saying a word, he walked to a cabinet built into the wall and removed a sealed package of plain butter crackers along with 2 unopened bottles of water. He carefully checked the factory seals himself before handing them to Lily. "These never entered the ballroom," he said gently. "They are safe." Lily smiled with the simple trust only a child could offer. "Thank you, Mr. Adrian." Something softened across his face. It lasted only a second, but I saw it clearly. The guarded businessman everyone feared disappeared, replaced by a man quietly relieved to see a little girl eating crackers after a frightening night. As Lily happily nibbled the first cracker, another technician hurried into the room carrying a printed maintenance report. "Sir, we found something unusual." Adrian accepted the papers. According to the records, one service elevator had been taken out of operation for nearly 40 minutes that afternoon because of a reported electrical inspection. The technician looked confused. The strange part is that building maintenance never requested the inspection. Adrian lowered the report and exchanged a long glance with me. "Someone needed that elevator unavailable." "Why?" I asked. He looked back toward the paused security footage showing the switched carts. "Because if that elevator had been operating normally, another camera would have recorded whoever prepared the second cart." Before anyone could respond, one of Adrian's senior advisors quietly entered the room with an expression I had not seen on him all evening. Calm had finally given way to concern. He leaned close and spoke only 6 words. "Sir, we found who booked Victoria." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who?" The advisor answered in almost a whisper. "Someone from your own executive office." I had seen disappointment before. I had seen exhaustion, grief, and quiet regret on people's faces while working endless catering jobs across New York City. But I had never seen betrayal arrive so silently. Adrian did not raise his voice after hearing the advisor's report. He did not slam his hand against the table or demand immediate answers. Instead, he closed his eyes for a single heartbeat before asking the only question that truly mattered. "Who approved the reservation?" The advisor placed a printed authorization form on the table. "Your executive assistant, Daniel Pierce." I watched Adrian read the page twice. The signature at the bottom belonged to Daniel, a man whose name had been mentioned throughout the evening with complete confidence. Every schedule, every guest confirmation, every security adjustment had passed through his office. "How long has he worked for you?" I asked quietly. Adrian never looked away from the document. "Almost 12 years." The room became impossibly still. 12 years was longer than many marriages lasted. Long enough to become family. Long enough to earn trust that no contract could buy. His security chief broke the silence. Daniel left the ballroom approximately 10 minutes before Miss Carter's daughter spoke. Another image appeared on the monitor. Daniel walked calmly through a side hallway carrying nothing but a leather portfolio. His expression revealed nothing unusual. "Where is he now?" Adrian asked. "We cannot locate him inside the hotel." Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, Adrian folded the authorization form and placed it back on the table with remarkable care. "Do not accuse him publicly," he said. Several members of his team looked surprised. "Sir, if Daniel betrayed us, then someone expects us to react emotionally." His voice remained steady. "We will disappoint them." I found myself studying him again. Every instinct told me he had just learned that one of his closest employees might have deceived him, yet he refused to let pain make his decisions. That level of discipline felt almost impossible. Lily finished her last cracker and quietly climbed onto the chair beside Adrian without asking permission. She looked up at him with complete innocence. "Are you sad?" she asked. The question caught everyone off guard. Adrian looked down at her for a long moment before answering honestly. "Yes." Lily reached into the pocket of her little sweater and pulled out a tiny folded paper napkin. Earlier that evening, she had drawn smiling flowers on it with pink and yellow crayons while waiting for me to finish decorating desserts. Without saying anything else, she placed the drawing in Adrian's hand. "You can keep it," she said. "When I get scared, drawing makes me feel better." I watched something extraordinary happen. Adrian Moretti, the man whose presence alone could silence an entire ballroom, stared at a child's crayon drawing as though it were the most valuable thing he had received all year. A faint smile finally appeared across his face. "Thank you, Lily." She nodded with complete satisfaction before returning to my side. His security chief quietly cleared his throat. "Sir, should we continue searching the hotel?" Adrian carefully folded the drawing and placed it inside his jacket pocket before answering. "Yes, but not only for Daniel." He turned toward the large security screen displaying dozens of camera feeds. Someone convinced a loyal employee to open the first door. Someone else arranged the false identity. Someone switched the carts. This was never one person's plan. His words shifted the entire investigation. They were no longer looking for a single missing suspect. They were uncovering a network built on carefully placed trust. Just then another technician rushed into the conference room carrying a tablet that had received an automatic alert from the hotel's digital access system. "Sir," he said, slightly out of breath, "one of the executive key cards assigned to Daniel Pierce was just used." Adrian immediately stepped forward. "Where?" The technician turned the screen toward him. Every person in the room leaned closer. The location flashing in bright blue letters was not a guest suite, not a hallway, and not an exit. It was the secure refrigeration room beneath the ballroom where the remaining desserts, including the untouched cake, had been stored since the investigation began. I used to believe that the sweetest thing inside a bakery was the smell of fresh vanilla. I was wrong. Sometimes the sweetest thing was the truth finally finding its way into the light. Nobody wasted a second after the security alert appeared. Adrian's team moved quickly but without panic, guiding hotel staff away from the lower service level, while local authorities who had already been notified quietly coordinated with hotel management. Lily remained beside me, holding my hand so tightly I could feel her tiny heartbeat through her fingers. Adrian looked at me before leaving the conference room. "Stay here. You are both safe." For reasons I could not explain, I believed him. Nearly 20 minutes passed before the conference room door opened again. Adrian returned first. His suit looked exactly as perfect as before, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who had finally received answers he never wanted. Behind him came two investigators from the city, followed by Daniel Pierce. His shoulders were lowered, his face pale, and the confidence I had seen in the security footage had completely disappeared. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody celebrated. The investigators quietly informed everyone that additional evidence collected from the refrigeration room, combined with hotel surveillance and digital access records, had confirmed a coordinated attempt to manipulate the evening's events and falsely redirect responsibility toward innocent staff members. Daniel admitted that he had approved fraudulent credentials after trusting information provided by outside contacts he believed were legitimate business partners. That misplaced trust had allowed the entire plan to unfold. The remaining individuals connected to the false identities were already being traced through security records, and official investigators would continue the case. Adrian listened without interrupting once. When the investigators finished speaking, Daniel lowered his head. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I thought I was helping protect everything you built." Adrian looked at him for a long moment before quietly answering. "Loyalty without honesty protects nothing." There was disappointment in his voice, but not cruelty. Somehow that made the moment even heavier. As the investigators escorted Daniel away to continue the official process, the ballroom slowly began returning to life. Guests were politely dismissed. Hotel employees carefully cleared the untouched dessert display. The great white cake that had started the longest night of my life disappeared into an evidence container instead of becoming the centerpiece of a celebration. I finally let out a breath I felt as though I had been holding for hours. "It is over," I whispered. Adrian turned toward Lily. "No," he said gently. "It ended because she chose to speak when every adult remained silent." Lily looked up with innocent confusion. "I only told the truth." Adrian smiled. "Exactly." He reached into his jacket and removed the little flower drawing she had given him earlier. The edges had become slightly bent, but he unfolded it with surprising care. "I intend to keep this." Lily grinned proudly. "You can have another one next time." The words made all three of us laugh for the first time that night. A week later, I returned to my small neighborhood bakery, expecting life to continue as though nothing had happened. Instead, a familiar black sedan stopped outside just after sunrise. Adrian stepped inside, carrying no security entourage, only a small white box. He placed it gently on the counter. Inside was a framed copy of Lily's drawing. Beneath it rested a handwritten note. It read, "The strongest walls cannot protect a person who stops listening. Thank you for raising someone brave enough to speak." I looked through the front window as he walked back toward the waiting car. Lily stood beside me holding my hand. "Mom," she asked softly, "is Mr. Adrian our friend now?" I smiled as the morning sunlight filled the bakery and the scent of fresh bread surrounded us once again. "Yes," I answered, "because sometimes family does not begin with blood, money, or power. Sometimes it begins with one small voice choosing courage over silence."